All right, welcome all to the second episode of the Legal Armor podcast, where we discuss legal topics and themes relating to real estate construction and rent. I'm your host, Roel Trump, an attorney based in Curacao, working in Curacao and Bonaire for over 8 years. And in this show, we will answer some common questions we receive in the three areas mentioned above real estate construction and rent. Before we proceed, if this is your first time watching us, remember to connect with us if you're watching us on LinkedIn, or subscribe if you're watching us on YouTube. Furthermore, keep in mind that the topics we discuss and the themes and the stories we discuss here are all for information purposes only. We do it in a bit of an entertaining way, so I will not go into the legalese, the cold and robust legal jargon. This is just trying to communicate with you in a straightforward way, in a simple way, so you understand conceptually the various legal aspects and factors that play a role in these fields. Okay, with that being said, let's start with the first question. Let's jump right in. What do I have to know before taking out a mortgage? This is a good question. This is a question that a lot of people do not ask before they take out a mortgage. A mortgage is... Okay, let's start with what a mortgage is before we proceed with anything else. A mortgage is basically a security that financier, whether that's your bank or someone you know, but your financier can demand when extending a loan. So when we say taking out a mortgage, actually what we want to say is taking out a loan with a mortgage as a collateral. Now, what's the mortgage? What's the mortgage? The mortgage is the right that the financier has on the property. Not on you personally, but on the property. It's a security right. And with that security right, what the person with the security right can do is, if you are in default and you're failing to comply with the payments, the financier can sell the property as if it is the owner of the property. Because remember, legally, only an owner of a property, so principle, only the owner of the property can sell the property. If I have a car, only I am entitled to sell the car. I can always give someone a power of attorney over the car. Yeah, in Dutch we say volmacht. I can always do that, and that is a possibility, but the power would still come from me, right? So with the mortgage, what it does is it gives the financier the power to execute and sell the property as if it is the owner of the property. This right goes so far, actually, that even if there's a bankruptcy, right? So you have a company, or whether personally or a company can go bankrupt, right? And then a trustee will be appointed by the judge, by the court, to oversee, to make a list of all the assets and all the liabilities that the company or the company or person who is bankrupt has, and based on that can determine to what extent it can pay off the creditors. Well, in such an instance, even in such an instance, the holder of the mortgage right has the right, or at least can sell the property, irrespective of the bankruptcy, unless it willingly distances himself from the right. That's not, if you're interested in that part, we can save it for another day because it's a very different topic, and maybe I can call someone, a lawyer who is specialized in bankruptcy law, and let that lawyer talk a bit more about the intricacies of bankruptcy, because that's a specific area of law, right? But to take it back to the mortgage, what do you need to know? You need to know that in a majority of cases, the bank or the financier doesn't want to use the right. So that's why some people can come with big properties and they're like, why won't the bank or the financier just let me borrow some money? I have enough property. But the financier doesn't want to use it. It has it as a backup, but preferably it wants you to pay your dues, right? So that's the first thing. Second thing you need to know is that it's important, in my opinion, not to over leverage. What do I mean by this? Sometimes you have a project and maybe the project is estimated at 500,000 guilders or dollars, depending on the jurisdiction, of course. And you go to the bank and maybe you have saved 100K yourself, so you have like 20%, you can put 20% down, and you go to the bank and the bank tells you, well, with your income you can actually get 800,000. And some people will be so excited when they hear that they can get more money, they jump right on it. Okay. That in itself has its risks, because you need to be sure that you'll be able to pay it off. If you take out an $800,000 or guilder loan, you will have 300,000 extra. What are you going to do with that money? Are you going to invest it in, for example, another apartment complex where you can get money from it? So will it be a investment, or will you just go and build a bigger house for yourself? Both of these options, there's not a good or bad option, but there's just we're just talking about legal risks here, right? The risk is that if your house or the property you have leveraged to get the loan, so the property that has the mortgage, is worth, for example, 500,000, and you took out a loan for 800,000. Remember that when you're paying off, you're going to pay off more than 800,000 because you need to pay off the interest. And if you're late with your payments, you will need to pay fines and other collection fees in some cases, right? So the cost, it's not you don't need to, the 800 you take out, the 800,000 you take out is not the 800,000 you would need to pay back. From a legal point of view, the risk is that it will probably take you either longer to pay off, because instead of getting, for example, a 15-year mortgage, you now took a 30-year mortgage, or you keep the 15 years to pay off the mortgage, but then you would need to pay probably almost double every month to pay it off in 15 years. Double than what you would have paid if you had taken out 500,000. So the risk in the first instance, when the term gets prolonged, the risk then becomes, if something were to happen to you, let's say you're unable to work due to an accident that happens. In the first situation, you would have had 15 years. The chances of something happening to you are oftentimes increased the older you get. So in the first 15 years, something can happen, but you can always bounce back. If something happens in the following 15 years, you're a bit older, it's going to take more time to recover, you might get fired. A lot of things can happen when you're older that will make it very difficult for you to pick back up. Whereas when you're younger, it's easier to get a job if you get fired. I'm just talking about probability here, right? So you basically prolong, you increase the period in which you can run a risk of not being able to pay off the loan. In the second instance, it's almost the same, but you will feel it every month. If you need to pay double the money every month, that means it might be taking a big chunk out of your paycheck, out of your income, and that can have negative consequences for you, because that means every month you're barely breathing. And it sounds logical, but a lot of people have this problem. You might see them with a big house, but it's the bank who gave him the house. You might see them with a great car, but it's the bank who financed the car. And to the outside world, they're living big, they're going to all the network events, but inside they have so much problem, because they know that if anything happens, any small thing can derail them and bring them into problems, right? So one of the most important things that you need to know: do not over leverage. Take out what you need, and when you take out, try to invest as much as possible instead of spending. So investment is something, an investment or an asset is something that puts money in your pocket, and liability is something that takes money out of your pocket. Rich Dad Poor Dad, amazing book. If you haven't read it, please do, just to get an idea of the two concepts. But a house that you're living in is not an investment. It's not an asset. It's an investment, but it's not an asset. Asset is a liability, because money is going every week or every month out of your pocket to pay it off, right? If the house is paid off, it's still a liability because it's not bringing money into your pocket, but you would still need to pay taxes and small repairs, sometimes big repairs. So it's still a liability, only a smaller liability. But instead, if you invest, for example, you buy a house, an apartment, a house which you then would rent or renovate and sell, they call it flipping, or you're buying an apartment complex to rent as well. Those are all assets because they're putting money in your pocket. So when I say try to invest to formulate it more accurately, I would say invest it more in assets than in liability. And if you're going to invest in a liability, for example, your house, just be aware that it is a liability. It's nothing wrong that it's a liability in itself, but you need to be aware that it is a liability and you would need to, continue to pay. This will help you budget, etc., etc. Now, one final aspect that you need to take into account. If, let's say, you take out an $800,000 loan, the guilder or dollar loan, and the house goes, or at least you go bankrupt, or you lose your job or whatever, and they sell the house. But if the house is worth 500, they probably won't be able to sell it for 500 if they auction it. It's probably going to go for 400, maybe. So let's say something happens after you finished off paying 200. So there remains, out of the 800,000, now remains 600,000. They sell it for 400,000. The 200,000 that remains is a direct claim that the bank will have on you. So the bank doesn't need to, the bank then we just need to collect it like any other creditor. It will not have the special position as a creditor when it that it had when it had the um, the mortgage, but it can still claim the remaining amount. It can still file a court case against you. It can still put seizure, so seize parts of your salary or any other assets you might have, right? So these are things that I would say are important to know when taking out a mortgage. If you have any other questions relating to this, please feel free to let me know, and we might discuss it in a next show. We're gonna go for the second one. And remember, we're here just to provide information. If you need tailored advice to your specific situation, take the information in, but discuss it with your lawyer, an attorney, a tax advisor, a notary, whoever the specialist is or specialists are that need to be included in your decision making. Yes? So the second question, why are there many legal disputes in construction projects? That is a good question. Construction projects have so many legal problems. And it's a very volatile field. A couple of reasons. First, you're dealing with a lot of people. And whenever there are people involved, there are problems. You have the buyer, you have the seller, you have the contractor, you have the architect, you have the project manager, you have the employees, the third parties that need to deliver products. Sometimes you need to import certain products, weather conditions, and so on and so forth. And because of all these factors, there are always problems in the construction sector. And what you also need to take into account that a lot of these people are sometimes of different nationalities. So you can have a local Curacao or Bonairean person. You can have a Latin person from Colombia, Venezuela, Cuba, or any other country. You can have Dutch. You can have American. You can have Haitian. So all these people, sometimes you have a language barrier as well. And due to the language barrier, you might be discussing something and it just gets lost in translation. What also makes it complicated is that a lot of these people, when they do business, they do not sign contracts. A lot of construction projects do not have contracts. If you go to buy a house, oftentimes, well, in that case, you have to have a written contract because the law says that you can't sell a house if the contract isn't in writing. We discussed that in the previous episode, so feel free to go check that one out. But all the other people working together do not necessarily need a contract in writing, that is. So what you will find is that someone will say, hey, can you build? So let's say you go to the contract, you go to the notary, you create a contract to buy a property, and now you have the property. That's in writing. But now you have to go and get someone to construct it for you. If you ask the contractor to build a big house, oftentimes they come with a plan, an estimate, drawings, and all those things. But if you just ask them to build an extra wall here, create a porch there, put a roof here, a small roof, build a garage there, those oftentimes are just verbal agreements. And the contractors will go in their turn and sometimes hire subcontractors, and they will often do that verbally. In this case, we have people working with people, working with people, working with people, speaking various languages, various nationalities, various level of intellect, various level of emotional intelligence as well. All these things play a role when you're dealing with an issue. And when a problem arises and I get a client, and the client will ask me, what can I do because this is wrong? The first thing I will say is, okay, but what did you agree on? If you can prove it in writing, because not all contracts need to be in writing. But the reason why you would want contracts in writing is that you can always see and show a judge later on, this is what we agreed upon. And when I ask them, some clients, what did you agree on? I will hear a list and I will say, okay, please send me the contract. And then silence, crickets. There's not much I can do. So that's why it's very important to have contracts in the construction field. Finally, one of the reasons why there are a lot of problems is because there is a asymmetry of information and information. There is an asymmetry in information. This is the last reason why there are a lot of problems in the construction area. And what do I mean by asymmetry in information? Oftentimes, the person who is contracting does not know a lot about the legal and technical intricacies. And there's an asymmetry. It's always dangerous to just go into business without understanding exactly what's going on. So in anything, for legal aspects, you would go to a lawyer. I will control what the contractor is doing. And that's how you eliminate the asymmetry. I mean, you might know this, the other person might know this, but if both people seek advice and support, they can meet each other and understand each other and understand exactly what's being done. And maybe then they might choose to proceed with the deal or step back and say, now I understand better what you're offering me. I'm good. Yes? Okay, we're gonna go to the third question. Did you sign the agreement with the right person? If you have to ask this question and formulate it like this, you're already too late. The question I want to receive as a lawyer is the right person going to sign the contract? Is the person that needs to sign the contract, is that person's name mentioned? Is it mentioned correctly? Let's say your name is Jane Doe and your sole proprietor, your company is called Doe's Cupcakes. Pun intended. Cheesy, I know, but still. If that person is going to sign the contract, the party can never be Doe's Cupcakes, because Doe's Cupcakes is not a legal person. It doesn't have legal personality. If it was called Doe's Cupcakes NV or Doe's Cupcakes BV, then the party to the contract can be Doe's Cupcakes BV or Doe's Cupcakes NV. But if it's a sole proprietorship, then the name that needs to be mentioned as a contractual party is Jane Doe operating as Doe's Cupcake, because Jane Doe is the person. Because if the entity doesn't have legal personality, then it has to be a person, a natural person. So it's either a natural person or a legal person. And now we go to the final question of today. Should I consult with a lawyer before buying or building a house? Why you should consult with a lawyer when buying or building a house is because you want to know what you're getting yourself into and what the risks you'll be taking are. You also want to know what you have to do in case there is a default. Oftentimes, if one of the party, let's say if my client is not a professional in the field of construction, either because the client is the investor, like a serial investor in real estate, or if it's a construction company, or for any other reason, if the client is a person that is not accustomed to the industry, the client doesn't know much. And oftentimes, the person that offers the contract is the party that is, in fact, familiar with the construction industry. And when they draft their contracts, they're going to draft it on your behalf, or at least on their behalf, not yours. Certainly not yours. They will draft it on their behalf. And when you read the contract, it seems as though they have all the rights and you would have all the obligations. The danger is that if, for example, the contract doesn't have let's say you're the buyer and you have a contract. The contract says if you are in default, you need to do this and that. But the contract doesn't say what they have to do when they're in default. Sometimes the contract says if we're default, we have a year to fix it. If you don't include clauses that are in your behalf to enforce when the other party is in default, you put yourself in a position, you put yourself basically at the mercy of the other contractual party, because if the contractual party doesn't comply, there's nothing you'll be able to do. You will just need to wait a year, for example. Sometimes people come to me after they've signed the contract. You're too late. You're too late. What can I do? If you already agreed to the terms, I should have had the chance to review it beforehand. So, should you or shouldn't you? I'm not saying you have to, but I'm saying you probably should. It's probably in your best interest to do so. With that being said, please, guys, let me know what you think about the topics we discussed. Is it relevant? Are there other relevant topics you want us to discuss? Remember to connect with us if you're on LinkedIn and subscribe if you are on YouTube. And just as a reminder, the topics we discussed were only for information purposes. Do book a call to give you the necessary feedback and advice. Yes, it's been a pleasure. And remember, prevention is better than cure. Until next time, take care.